Good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for coming. As chair, I really should be calling this meeting to order outside. It's way too nice to be inside today, and finally spring is here, so hopefully allergies aren't too bad for everybody and we can enjoy this weather. I'd like to call the meeting of April 10th TTCC to order. And with that, I'll do introductions. Of course, you know Jim Urban, Oldham County Planning.
Larry Cheney, KIPTA.
Matt Minier, City of Jeffersontown.
Jim Solomon, Oldham County.
Brittany Montgomery, Town of Clarksville. Felicia Harper, Bullitt County Planning. Michelle King, Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District.
Ida Hopi,
Keith Griffey, Bullitt County.
Dirk Cohen, Louisville Metro.
Tony Higdon, KYTC Planning Central Office.
Tom Hall, KYTC Planning District 5.
Travis Thompson, KYTC District 5, Project Development.
Ivy Holder, KYTC District 5 Planning.
Craig Butler, Louisville Metro Air Pollution Control District.
Bradley Coombs, Air Pollution Control District.
Ashley Willis, Regional Mobility Council. Heidi Bennett, ACOM.
Mike King, Louisville Metro.
Andy Margaret, Louisville Metro.
Adam Forsyth, KIPTA.
David Coit, CART.
Carl Sawyer, Integrated.
Dave Lamb, Palma. Ruby Bowles, Tremont. Andy Rush, KIPTA.
Elizabeth Park,
David Burton with Nick Vale with KIPTA.
Amanda Duffridge with KIPTA. Sarah Bear, KIPTA.
Great. Thanks, everybody. Action is requested on the minutes for the March 13th TTCC meeting. If everybody has looked them over and they find them in order, I'd be looking for a motion to approve.
Motion.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Dirk is a second. Thank you. Any other comments or questions regarding the minutes? And if there are none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Minutes are approved. Next agenda item is the Transportation Policy Committee report. Mr. Cheney.
Yes, sir. At the Policy Committee meeting March 28th, the committee acted on things that this body had recommended approval for. Among them would be the amendments to the MTP and to the TIP. The participation plan update, we will have a little bit this afternoon about that. We talked about what was coming up with the new participation plan revision. We also took the recommendation of this committee for the shift prioritization process for the sponsorship, and the committee acted on that. What had occurred between this meeting and that meeting is that one of the projects that we had on our list had also been sponsored by the cabinet. So the addition of the Nulu project went forward. Metro suggested that we push the Phillips Lane project out of the list of recommendations, but we added it back in there because it was in that order. So we added that back in there since we had one extra project to go. So that was the list that the TPC approved, and we also added administrative modifications to the TIP. That concludes the report.
Great. Any questions about the Policy Committee report or what happened, especially with the shift projects? Pretty straightforward. Great. There being none, we'll go to public comment. Anybody from the public that wants to speak about a subject? Now's your time. Mr. Coit, welcome. I haven't seen you in forever. Hope you're doing well. I thought maybe you had something to say, but you're welcome to be here, of course. Next item is, if there's nobody then, next item is TARC's project update. Aida.
Thank you. Great. Thank you. I thought I'll put a couple of pictures, so I have to talk less and the pictures will talk more. Well, thank you, KIPTA, for giving an opportunity to TARC to present update on the projects that are funded to this body, mainly TAP and CMAC, and there are significant improvements made with these funds community-wide. I would like to mention that TARC is celebrating 45 years this year, so we are around for a long time and we hope to stay around for a long time, maybe in better and more efficient form. This is rocket science. Thank you. A little bit about our numbers from the last fiscal year, and basically it says a lot what TARC does in the community. In the past fiscal year, we moved almost 12.5 million people system-wide. On an average day, we provide more than 41,000 trips on TARC buses. We have total of 43 routes. They are grouped in high frequency, express, local, and circulators. And as you all know, we provide service in 2 states and 5 counties. We are very proud of that because not very many transit systems actually cross the boundaries. Altogether, we have now more than probably 200, almost close to 230 buses. That includes 33 hybrid electric, 15 all electric, and more than 100 paratransit vehicles. Our team members in last fiscal year was 640. Now it's almost 690. And this 2018 fiscal year data is the baseline for our overall system review, comprehensive operations analysis, and later long-range plan. Let's start with projects in Indiana. One really project to look forward is in city of Jeffersonville and its Spring Street corridor improvements. That is improving sidewalks, amenities, and expand connectivity, obviously ADA access, and install 7 benches, improve 8 boarding pads. Obviously, 1 shelter, number of shelters always depends on the surrounding properties and if properties and the surrounding owners are welcoming shelters or not. So we try to install them wherever we can. And significant improvements with 3,000 or more feet of new sidewalks. Project status is that we are awaiting design approval and also awaiting authorization of funding from FDA. The authorization is in progress, and City of Jeffersonville and TARC are responding with some additional documents, NEPA documents primarily. It's interesting that we go through the process of approval, then we go through the process of transferring funds, and still with FDA we go through the double process of approving all compliance, if it's NEPA, if it's federal regulation, whatever. It's almost like going through the application process twice. Even if the funding is available to TARC, there is still a long time to pass before funding is actually obligated and in our hands to make these improvements. That was funded with 2018 Indiana TAP funding, and the total cost is $273,000, with City of Jeffersonville providing almost $57,000 in local match. Another exciting project that connects Kentucky and Indiana are 2 cross-river routes that are funded with Indiana CMAQ, and actually we just requested, INDOT requested, KIPTA and INDOT requested transfer of these funds to FTA, and it's transferred for 1 year. The project is awarded 3 years of funding, so we hope that the subsequently year 2 and year 3 will be transferred as soon as possible, or as INDOT has this funding available. So this is implementation of 2 crosstown routes to provide access to jobs from downtown Louisville, West Louisville, New Albany, and all the way to River Ridge Commerce Center as a major developing employment center in the region. And obviously we have a new bridge on the east end, and there is lack of connectivity with northeastern Jefferson County across the new bridge to southern Indiana. So these 2 routes are planned, and we are lucky the funding is awarded. Hopefully, if the funds are obligated, maybe during the summer or this year, later this year we can implement this new service, or if not before, then January 2020. This will significantly improve access to jobs. The awarded funding is approximately, the total project is about approximately $3 million over 3 years. We also received TAP funding for solar shelters. We planned for 5 solar shelters. Some of them are in the downtown area and some are on the outlying area of the county. This is to improve amenities at heavily used TARC stops. obviously improve lighting and safety and make our transit users feel better while they are waiting for the buses. Also, to mention that is environmentally sustainable infrastructure, and we would hope to implement more of solar shelters as we go. 3 of those solar shelters have been funded and moved forward. We are expecting approval for 2 more from FDA. The total project cost is approximately $100,000. Park Place Mall is a transit node that is planned obviously on the forthcoming bus rapid transit. And we purposely, first of all, this is already existing park and park location, and we purposely planned it there to provide additional connectivity from the surrounding area and new BRT transfer between local and BRT service that does include pedestrian improvements, also hopefully bike racks and maybe some bike amenities, overall improvements to transit in this area. Project status is that preliminary design is ahead of us, and also authorization can begin upon selection of the engineering and architectural consultant by TARC. We are in the process of the RFP to commission these services, and obviously we need to design the project. Funding is not, obviously, it's limited like everything else, but it's approximately $130,000. And we will do improvements as much as we can with these funds. We are, similar to Jeffersonville project, responding to FDA with NEPA requests. And the funding should be obligated soon this year. One of the previous projects that you've heard of, and it's good to have a kind of reminder what happens with the CMAQ and service fundings when it's awarded. We implemented Riverport Circulator in November 2017. It was funded with Kentucky CMAQ funds, about $2.5 million. That includes local match from TARC and state funding. It was awarded for 3 years, but the state contract actually was shaped for 2 years, and it's expiring end of this year. So either we need to request extension of the contract or make decision if the service is going to continue. Unfortunately, the ridership really didn't establish itself. The ridership is low, and I'm sure you remember that this project was implemented based on strong community involvement. We had cloud organization advocating for the project. We had 2 CMAQ applications. The first one wasn't awarded. The second one was awarded. Everybody was thrilled about project implementation. We adjusted service twice to provide and improve connectivity to Valley High School, also to some other businesses in the area. It's relatively good service, but for whatever reason, we don't really see ridership going up. Also, it's important to mention that employment centers is probably the biggest challenge to be served by public transportation because of the varying shift, huge areas, majority of people driving, difficult of access, because when we place these employment centers across the community, we mostly think about access for trucks and cars. Pedestrian and transit access is an afterthought. We always think, okay, oops, now we have these employment centers, but we don't have people here. So this simultaneous connection between land use and transportation would really make huge solution for locations like that. That doesn't necessarily mean we need to give up. We need to figure out how to promote this service, how to advocate, how to maybe include information into employment packages for new upcoming employees. So there is a lot of opportunities, but this service either needs improvement or we need to decide what's going to happen with it. So KIPTA, this body awards us annually $250,000 for system-wide bus stop and access improvements. And those are the projects that frequently we ask ourselves, where is this money go? Where are the improvements happening? Can we list them? So these improvements are basically system-wide, and many times these are projects of opportunities. If state or public works does something, we really have great partnership with both, with state and public works. They call us, we call them. So we basically combine these funds awarded through state and KIPTA, and while the road is under construction, we jump and make also transit improvements along with that. So there are significant improvements, and I would like to mention what happened in the past year. In the fiscal year 18, basically, with these funds, we implemented 1,500 feet of sidewalks. We improved 44 bus stops in 1 year only. That includes shelters, benches, boarding areas. 3 bus stops were improved with ADA ramps and access, 10 new shelters, 34 new benches, with total investment of $425,000. So one pocket of money triggers the other. So $250,000 grows with local match from TARC and other bodies. So I think it's money well spent. On these pictures, you see how some of these improvements look. This is our open air shelter at Taylor Boulevard and at the front of Wyandotte Park. You can see how it looked before and how it looks now. And also some other interesting pictures that on the left side you can see 3rd Street and Collins Court, how sidewalk looked before and how it looks with improvements, boarding area and bench. Also Taylor Boulevard and Carlisle. Nothing at the corner, and after the money is invested, we have nice boarding area for passengers. On the right side is one of the smart shelters that was partnership with Louisville Metro Housing Authority and funded by partially by different grant, but also with TARC expertise. It's in front of Catholic Charities and really provides access to transit for people who need it the most. A number of projects in the pipeline with this $250,000 coming annually. I'm not going to list them all, but important to mention that obviously Dixie BRT is going forward. Once the money is spent from the Tiger grant and the funds allocated to this project, TARC will continue making improvements and connect local and BRT service. We have a Jeffersontown project going on, Preston Highway Phase 2 in the pipeline, 3rd Street sidewalk improvements. We have improvements at the end of the BRT line for the bus turnaround, and then a number of other corridors we are planning improvements in West Louisville on Muhammad Ali and Chestnut. We just shaped up this project and it's ready to go. In the pipeline also for this year, 20 new benches. Probably replacement of at least 25 outdated and all the Stark shelters, repainting the others. So I would say we have really great program for shelter and sidewalk improvements. Public Works is our main partner, state as well. And once again, money well spent. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions or comments for Aida?
It's a little disappointing about the Riverport Connector
Very
because
disappointing.
we had business support and we had a group who seemed to be representing a group interested in the jobs.
Correct, and very concerning. I mean, for me, it's hard to report that. I wish I would have different numbers, but we are obviously working on the comprehensive operations analysis and looking at every single route. So this is part of that. We need to find out what improvements can be done or adjustments to schedule or anything to either make it work or maybe have responsible decision for spending public budget.
You never know unless you try.
Exactly. So maybe there are better days for this service.
Aida, I got two things, and I apologize, I didn't keep you informed on this, but last Tuesday at Fiscal Court, we opened bids for the permanent park and ride at Apple Patch in Brownsboro. And the lowest bidder, we had 3 bidders, the lowest bidder was only about 4% over our engineer's estimate, so we think we'll be able to move forward finally with that project. It's been years in the making, but I think we're finally going to get there. So
Wonderful.
So that's good news. The question I had was, you had a figure, if I'm remembering correctly, of 41,000 boardings average weekday. How does that compare over the years? Are you seeing that ridership is increasing, decreasing, staying the same?
Ridership is slightly down over, let's say, last 10 years. And there are a number of reasons for that. It's down 2-3% every year, 2 to 4. So over 10 years, it's really down probably 20%. The reason why is in 2008, when the economy was hardest, the ridership was highest because people went to transit. Then economy recovered a little bit, one step at a time. In 2010, TARC went through major service cuts. So every cut in service reduces ridership. Then economy recovered, people rode less nationally, ridership trend is going down. So TARC is following national trends, not good for either nationally or locally, but it's kind of slowly going down. We hope to reverse this trend. We hope that the COA project will really recommend major service restructuring. It's premature to say. We have heavy public involvement along with that. We need to understand what this community expects from transit, but we think if we revise and restructure the system like some other agencies across the country, there was huge success with reversing downward trends, stabilizing ridership and going up. So a year down the road, we probably will have different discussion how this system could look in the mid and long term, and I'd be happy to provide an update whenever Larry is involved and also Tonya and the team. So whenever you feel there is a time to involve this body more, we're happy to do that.
I think in the next month or so, and we've got another meeting, what, 2 weeks, 3 weeks from now, I think?
Yes, we do, exactly.
Maybe evaluate at that point, see where you are, bring it back
I
to
think that
to
would
both
be
this
good
group
time.
and the TPC, I think.
Great, I think that would be good time.
I have a follow-up to your question, if you don't mind. Jim asked about overall ridership numbers. Does TARC look at ridership any differently? Do they look at ridership by service miles? Is there any other type of
Right.
metric that you
Right.
look at to determine
Right.
how well the system is operating,
Right.
besides just the raw ridership numbers?
Yes, there is. And we actually look at every single number we can possibly look on every stone. First of all, we start with average weekday, with total monthly, with annual ridership. Then we look at riders per hour, riders per mile, cost per rider, riders per trip. We compare these numbers, and I also monitor nationally how we compare with the peer agencies. Let's say about maybe 6-7 years ago when we worked on Move Louisville, TARC, the same consultant, did peer agency review for a different project, and we ranked in the middle or upper high. We actually ranked well based on the rider per hour and per mile, and even cost per rider. So I looked at all these numbers, especially just now, but I look at them every month. Doesn't really help me every month to look at them, but I do. And those are the numbers that indicate how we do. So actually we were doing well. As part of our COA, we will do peer-reviewed agencies with 10 agencies, and I actually talked directly with Jacksonville, with Columbus, and with Indigo just 2 weeks ago to learn from their experience when they went through the process. So we will have the numbers, and we'll tell you how TARC does comparing with others. But yeah, we do. Some numbers are actually not good to present. Sometimes when I see how much is a cost per rider on certain service, there is clearly justification that requires deeper evaluation. Should we keep or should we remove this type of service? We have some very costly service operating for very few users, but balancing between service coverage, leaving people stranded on the road, or between service frequency is an art for every transit agency.
But you think part of the ridership decline is due to the cutback in services?
Always is.
If you don't
Yes.
provide it.
Yes.
you
For
know, they're not
example,
gonna route.
express routes, and there was discussion on express, eliminating express, increasing in 2010 and 2012, increasing the fare, which happened then. But for example, if express service from 4 trips in the morning goes to 2 trips in the morning, we pretty much lose 30-40% of riders. We lose revenue. Every fare increase results in drop in ridership. So ridership is like weather. Everything impacts ridership, whether it's snow day or hot day or bad weather or cancellation of university classes, or a lot of impact on ridership. How is economy doing, gas prices?
And a lot of the issue that you can't provide services, you don't have operating costs.
Right. We just need a little bit more money.
And we can't, unfortunately, provide you that except in these little short bursts through the CMAQ dollars.
Every dollar well invested is appreciated. Actually, this morning I went to the shelter ribbon cutting in St. Matthews, where Independence Bank provided partnership in their investment. And just one shelter at one corner improves the whole area. So every dollar is important. Thank you for the
Thank you.
questions.
Anybody else? Great, thanks, Heidi.
Thank you very much. Appreciate this.
Next item is quarterly project review. Nick, and we're going to, action is requested on this item, so we'll be
Yes.
looking for a motion.
Yes, let me just pull this up real quick. All right, good afternoon, everybody. My name is Nick Vale with KIPTA. Today I'm presenting our quarterly project review update. In this quarter, I'll spare you the background a little bit. We started this process a few years ago. We've got rules. I think most folks know we've got a process in terms of submitting quarterly progress reports for any of the projects that the TPC has awarded our MPO dedicated funds to. So they're outside of our MPO dedicated funds. The state of Kentucky has their own, NDOT has their own, and we work with them on identifying priorities. For these projects, agencies can submit cost increases when the funds are available, as well as shifting phases back when things are delayed in terms of project management. There's a variety of reasons for that. In Kentucky, we know well the issues with utilities and working with the companies there. We've got rules in terms of exceptions for both managing our costs and schedules. And in certain instances, mostly in Indiana, we're allowed to kind of move up to 50% from one program to another. Obviously in Kentucky, we just have the 2 programs, so it doesn't often make a whole lot of sense to do that. In terms of what's going on right now, the status in Indiana as of fiscal year 19, across the top you see the 4 federal programs for which we receive funds for. And then on the left-hand side, you'll see the annual allocation that we received this year, how much has been obligated, including how much was obligated this quarter, and then lastly, how much is unobligated. And in Indiana, this is extremely important to pay close attention to. Right now, we're kind of winding down the fiscal year, and in Indiana, there's, with few exceptions, it's a use it or lose it system. So if we don't spend these funds in fiscal year 19, they go back to the state. So we're in a pretty good place right now. I believe you can see congestion management, or congestion mitigation, air quality program, CMAQ, we've obligated all of those funds. Highway safety transportation improvement program, same thing there. With the surface transportation block grant program, there are, I think, 1 or 2 projects that as probably this week or next will be obligated. And then the one transportation alternatives projects, I think, is
We got obligated last week.
right. So we're in a good place there. These numbers that I got were based on progress reports from about a month ago. So we're in good shape in Indiana. There were no phase shifts, and there rarely are because of the carryover policy, and we didn't have any funds available for cost increases. So this is all I have on Indiana status. I'll kind of take a pause here if anybody has any questions. In addition to that, in your packet, you'll always find with this item progress report summaries about whether phases of each project are on schedule, behind schedule, or something unknown. So you can take a look there if you have any questions after the meeting. In Kentucky, we have the authority, or this body, TTCC I should say, has the authority to award funds for the surface transportation program, now called the Surface Transportation Block Grant. At the beginning of the fiscal year, we had about $68.4 million program. Keep in mind that we normally receive about $19 million a year. This gets back to the carryover balance that we have in Kentucky. So that's why we have about 3 years worth of projects programmed for this fiscal year. To date, we've only obligated about $1.1 million, and we haven't shifted any funds, any projects yet to the future. We have 4 or 5 months from now to really hit our stride in terms of obligating more dollars, and hopefully that does happen in the big picture. The kind of short-term goal would be to obligate at least $19 million, which is how much we brought in this year, or how much we received in our allocation this year, so that we avoid adding to our carryover balance. In the transportation alternatives side of things, we had about $3 million program this year. We've obligated a little over $600,000. I think that was the J-Town ADA ramps project. They've got a multitude of ramps throughout the city that they're improving to ADA compliance. And in the big picture here for Transportation Alternatives Program is that we need to obligate at least $2 million this year to avoid lapsing any funds. So in this case, unlike with Surface Transportation Block Grant funds, we don't have as much flexibility. So we've got 4 or 5 projects scheduled for this fiscal year. You can find those projects in the progress report update. About half of those projects are on schedule, and we think we're going to hit this $1.2 million mark. If we do not, then this committee and TPC may have to determine, what happens to those projects that didn't move forward that we lost funding for. So that's a potential scenario in 4 or 5 months. Any questions there on kind of just the overall status in Kentucky? All right. Moving on, we did have cost increase opportunity this quarter for Kentucky project sponsors. We had a little over $8 million available. Today, I included with the agendas an update to the Kentucky project changes list. The changes that were made were 3 additions for Louisville Metro, Louisville Loop projects that just recently received bids for the final design, or final design. Thank you. So they didn't really know until fairly recently that they would need additional funds. So they have been added in here. We have more than enough funds to cover all of the cost increases that were submitted. So this is page 1 of 2. I'll go through some of these here. The Olmsted Stone Arch Bridge Rehab Project, this is one to make note of. Specifically in the handout, there's a note down at the bottom in the footer because there's some concern that J-Town's working with KYTC on some approvals of a bid for the construction of this project. And so this action is actually contingent upon KYTC approving that bid. All of the others are good to go. We've got a mixture of transportation alternatives projects and STVG projects. You can see on the second column from the right, the total percent increase. I've highlighted in red all of those projects that have requested over the 20% amount, which is kind of our standard rule, although we have an exception for that. So all of those agencies that are over that 20% have submitted an exception letter. Those were included in this packet and will also be included in the packet to TPC about some extenuating circumstances with their project costs. And sometimes if things are delayed for a year or 2, that estimate is not even close to current year's estimate. So variety of projects in here. I can take any questions about any specific projects. The total amount that we're asking you all to recommend approval of is $6.7 million. So we still have another couple $1 million available in fiscal year 20 in case there are additional cost increases. With that, I'll answer any questions before asking for action. Seeing none. And I didn't list every single proposed change up here, but essentially this document, agenda item 6C, are the cost increases that I am asking this committee to recommend approval to the TPC for these 14 cost increases.
Make a motion to approve the 14 cost increases.
Thank you, Dirk. Is there a second?
Second.
Aida? Any questions of Nick or questions about the motion that's on the floor?
Can I just make a general comment?
Sure.
And maybe it's because in Indiana we're held to such strict standards. But I would think that maybe in Kentucky you need to look at something similar, because it seems like a lot of funds are not getting obligated on time, and it forced us in Indiana to get our projects done then and there. We don't have as many cost overruns because we have to do it then. I just looking at going through this information over the weekend. Again, we hate it. We can do it in Indiana, but think that this organization or KYTC may want to look at going to something similar because it forces us to do our projects. We don't have the cost overrides, and it concerns me that obligate any money in the fiscal year. And I just wonder if the process needs to be reexamined.
The process is in place to do that. We have exceptions that have to be approved by the TTC. But yet there's a limitation on the amount of money you can increase. Above and beyond that, you have to ask for an exception. There's only a certain amount of money available for cost increases. If other projects use it, you don't get to use it. There's none there. The process is in place. It just hasn't really had the opportunity to really kick in the way it's going to in the not too distant future.
Okay, and maybe that's just it. It hasn't really fully kicked in to where it's going to start to have those repercussions of your project's not.
We're still in transition, and one of the most serious repercussions is if you don't start your design on time, you go to the end of the line. So it's going to surface in a lot stronger fashion in the not too distant future.
Okay, and then that makes sense because I know you guys implemented the new process, and so when you guys did that, and I guess I was thinking maybe we start to see that coming to a head more and sooner than maybe what it is. I guess I was expecting some of that to start to force some of the projects to get moving in that sooner than what I guess we are. So we just haven't gotten to that point then.
To your question, Brittany, I think we have made improvements over the last 2 fiscal years. If you look at the end of the fiscal year, how much we've obligated, when you compare that to, say, fiscal year 14 and 15, there have been significant improvements in how much money has been obligated. I don't think either 2 of those years that we've actually obligated up to the amount that we've been allocated that fiscal year. So that's still a work in progress. And again, I think a lot of what happens, at least in Kentucky, is, and I think it probably happens in Indiana as well. I know Indiana's on a different fiscal year than Kentucky. So you guys are right at the finish line right now, whereas they've still got 4 or 5 more months to obligate funds.
Okay.
And a lot of times what happens is a lot of those obligations come towards the end of the fiscal year.
And that makes sense because they have to be obligated in Kentucky what?
By September 30th.
Okay, they don't have the June
Right.
deadline. Okay. And that just makes some more sense.
But there have, like Nick says,
there
have been significant improvements on the amount of money that's been programmed, and also the transparency issue and the fact that we did set those thresholds, and the committee has to see those before they approve them.
Right.
It's not just a carte blanche like it used to be.
And I see this, and I see that improvement here. It just, I guess are they going to get 19 million obligated this year? Are they going to get close? And I guess that's just the question I have, and trying to make sure that those funds do get obligated and the process moves forward.
That's our goal, to actually obligate more than the annual allotment.
And Brittany, as an LPA, I think we're always thinking about that. Every time we get asked to update our project status or ifs or whatever, we're always thinking about pushing the schedule to make sure we don't have to ask for extensions or additional monies. I think 2 things in my mind. Indiana started a couple years before Kentucky, if I don't remember correctly. That you've had a couple more years of that kind of project deadline and no additional funds. And then the other thing is some of our projects that are in that process, we didn't really necessarily get good original estimates. And even though we try to update our project status with estimates, and there's one in particular that stands out in my mind, the Kentucky 329, we're asking for a 237% increase. Well, that's because what we thought the alignment had a showstopper. So it completely changed not only the alignment, but the budget when we were going through a historic property, and we thought we could, without affecting structures, the whole property was on the National Register. So,
And we pointed this out a lot in the past, that NDOT decided to do that arbitrarily. They just decided it, whether it's right, wrong, whatever, that's their process now. And they did that because there was such a backlog of dollars in all the MPOs, not just ours. Ours was minor compared to the others. At some point in time, KYTC may decide to do the same thing. We don't know. We have, when they start to do, as funds become sparse, as they are becoming, that could happen in the future. So we really need to be cognizant of that and try to keep these projects moving.
Yeah, and I think that's more the point I have we got caught off guard. And if I just see this, and if this were, if KYTC today were to come down here, I don't know what you guys would do. Because the dollar amounts are so much larger here. And I understand the special circumstances. I just have, looking at it and how much is continuing to just, it seems like, get pushed to the next fiscal year. It's somewhat concerning to make sure, and some of these cost increases are, we've had so much time go past. And sometimes you wonder if, and everyone wants to try to stay on schedule. Look, we've all been there. But being forced to do that is a different story than you're just trying. Because, like, your funds aren't obligated, you're lost them. And being able to force, then suddenly you have someone who's holding you severely accountable because it's gone. I think some of that also, make or break it.
And it's changed the type of projects we can do in Indiana.
Right.
So we don't want that to happen.
Yeah, I think it's more of a warning here in Kentucky because I can see that. And I don't know how if that were to happen, even, and they give you a year's warning, what would happen to the projects here?
Valid question. Yep.
So we do have a motion and a second on the floor, and appreciate that, Brittany, the comments. Any other comments, I guess, in particular with the motion? Or questions? There being none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Thank you all.
You have it. The next item is Connecting Kentuckiana MTP. I guess David and Nick, you're both going to be involved in this?
Yeah, I'm going to start us off, and Nick's going to join in just a few minutes. Okay. I was trying to think the last time I gave an update to the MTP to this body, and it's been a couple of months. So I wanted to give you an update now as to where things are, because we're looking at some big changes. So we're going to take a little history lesson to start off with. Right now, we are currently operating under Horizon 2035, which is the current Metropolitan Transportation Plan. So that's the one that is the main document that we're using. This was adopted by our Transportation Policy Committee in August of 2014. And then following the action of the Policy Committee, we forward the MTP. We do the same thing with the TIP to the federal agencies, and they look to make sure we are meeting the federal conformity requirements. We're going to talk about those again in just a minute. That happened in October of 2014. According to the regulations, that when this MTP was adopted by the TTCC and had a federal conformity finding, at the time, we had a 5-year planning window. In other words, we had 5 years to update the MTP, Horizon 2035. So that means in October of 2019, the current MTP, Horizon 2035, will actually expire. So our goal has been to make sure that we have the update completed prior to October 2019. Let's talk about federal conformity. Federal conformity is basically our 3 federal planning partners: the Federal Highway Administration, the Federal Transit Administration, and the Environmental Protection Agency. They work together to look at our MTP thinking and come up with a conformity finding on both the planning and regulations and on the Clean Air Act. In other words, are we hitting the regs that they have been as they have been described to us through the US DOT, and are we hitting the air quality components as defined by the Clean Air Act? There are 3 basic areas. The regs are many pages, but the 3 basic areas that the Federal Highway Administration, Transit Administration, and EPA look at. Fiscally reasonable. We've been looking at that one for a long time. Performance-based transportation planning. That's the new one. That's the big one in the process that we're dealing with. And are we updating our schedule? I mean, are we updating our MTP on schedule? Right now, there's that 5-year window. On the air quality side, is the transportation plan contributing to the SIP budget? In other words, are we helping to achieve the air quality goals that have been set forth for us. So those are the basic things that they're looking for. There are other smaller pieces that they look at, but these are the 4 big ones. If we do not hit any of those 4, or are not prepared to hit any of those 4, we go into what's called a conformity lapse grace period. That means that of the 4 plus a few other items that we've talked about here, our transportation plan will not meet one of them or any of them. And so then we go into a grace period, conformity lapse grace period, which basically means we have 12 months in order to get everything up to date. Our update schedule is off. Primarily because of the new changes that have been introduced. We have a good, very good performance-based process that we've defined. Excellent. But the difficulty is now that we have this new process in place, we are now going to be held accountable for it. So what types of improvements or contributions might the transportation plan make to achieving those targets? We need to be able to define that. So KIP, the staff, has along with the policy committee and this committee, we have implemented a new process that helps us to do that. So we are continuing to work on that, and that process to help meet that one measure, that one area of performance-based transportation planning, has slowed us down a little bit. So it looks like we may be going into a conformity lapse grace period beginning October 23rd, 2019. What that means is that we are going to have that 12-month grace period to make sure we get everything correct and right and in good status. During that grace period, we can continue to authorize federal funds from the current Transportation Improvement Program. So the projects that you have in there now will not be affected. What that also means is we cannot amend the Horizon 2035 MTP. We can't add new projects to it. And we cannot amend the current 2018 to 21 Transportation Improvement Program. The projects that are in there as of October 23rd will be the projects that advance. That's what that means. Now, what we can do with the TIP is we can do admin mods. As you all know, the admin mods are those small changes. We can shift funding between years. We can do those types of things. But if we do anything that would trigger an air quality analysis in the MTP, that would have to wait during the lapse period or the grace period. So here's our plan. We want to bring to you, or the top of the policy committee, a draft of the MTP in the 2020 to 2025 TIP in February, if not before. No later than February. We're going to work with Eric and his federal partners to basically trim a 60-day comment period down to 30 or less, so that we have that federal conformity in March of 2020 or before. So that's basically, that's the plan. But there's a stopgap measure that Nick's going to kind of talk about now, and how we help you get to through the grace period and to continue to move your projects.
Right. Thanks, David. Following this meeting, I'm going to send out a schedule for a TIP MTP amendment to both current documents. This amendment, primary purpose is to get any projects that are not currently in this TIP, and that would basically mean fiscal year 19 or fiscal year 20 projects that are not included in any shape or form in that TIP into it through this amendment. So if you've got a fiscal year 20 project that you've got funds that you want to bring to the table, this would be the opportunity to do that. In addition, staff is going to look at any projects that are in the current TIP that may need to be modified because there's some air quality conformity determination that needs to be made, an update of a schedule or something to that effect. And so staff's going to handle that. We're going to run the query through the TIP and identify all those projects that may be impacted if for some reason a 19 phase of your project doesn't get obligated this fiscal year and we have to push that off to 20. In some cases, there can be air quality considerations. So I'm not going to bore you with the details of what types of air quality considerations. If you have questions, definitely contact me. But we're going to be reaching out to everybody who has a project in the current TIP that may fall in that category. Does that make sense for everybody? And then in terms of the schedule, I said I'll send this out. But we're going to try, because we need to have this amendment approved by Federal Highways prior to October, is going backwards. We're trying to get action in July from our two committees, meaning we would need project information forms, PIFs, from you all by the end of this month, April 30th. So again, if you guys have any projects that are not in the current TIP and have fiscal year 19 or 20 phases, please let us know immediately and work with us. And 21 phases. I think we're okay on 21.
Yeah, we don't need to, just 19.
Send those to us, and we will reach out to you guys in regards to any of the other projects that are currently in the TIP that may need to be adjusted because of air quality concerns.
Can I add to what you're saying?
Absolutely.
We do want to make sure that you understand that there's a difference between what Nick is talking about with this July amendment and the MTP application process. If you have submitted projects for the MTP application process through that portal, and those do not need to be in the TIP in the very near term, don't add them to that process now, to what Nick's talking about now. If you have new projects that you will need to obligate prior to March, go ahead and send them in. But if they can wait for obligation until after March, hold on to them. Make sure we have them in the MTP update that we're working on also. So we don't want you to move all your projects that you've been submitting to us for the MTP update into this process that Nick is talking about. We want to keep them separate. Is that a fair assessment?
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's basically what we're trying to achieve. This morning, we had a staff meeting. Larry called us all together. Larry was saying, let's get this done. All hands on. So we're going to move this process forward, and we're going to get to a point where we have the document in your hands, the draft document, hopefully before February 2020. That's our hope and our goal, and I don't think we'll have a problem achieving that, but we've given ourselves internally, and you as well, to February 2020 to get the draft document into your hands. Please, if you've got questions, let's hear them. Because this will allow us to continue to advance and obligate projects that are in the current TIP. This will not allow us to amend the current MTP or TIP after October 23rd.
The impact on project sponsors, if we're successful with this amendment, you won't even notice anything. It won't be any different than if we hadn't gone into this grace period. But we do need to make sure that anything that you want obligated in 19 or 20 appears in that TIP.
I'm afraid we're not new to this. We've gone through this before. And we've become like resident experts at it. So it's imperative that you look at your current projects in the TIP and make sure that if you anticipate any changes to those projects that will need to be made prior to March of 2020, bring them to us now when Nick sends you this email. Start talking to us, start working with us, and we're going to help you make sure that you won't feel this. That we'll take care of it. So that's what we really want to hit home with. That this is something that we've done before, we can do it again, and we'll take care of it.
If memory serves me, one time when we were in a grace period, we were coming really close to not being able to authorize any additional funds or projects actually coming to a stop. This doesn't sound like we're anywhere near that situation.
No, the last time was with the bridges update,
Yes.
plan.
We didn't have time to prepare like we do this time.
Right, yeah. This sounds like with the February and March, you're in.
We're in good shape.
Plenty of good, plenty of time.
And we're in a different circumstance here. We've got all the projects in Indiana that are in good shape out a couple of years. Last year, we got the 6-year plan projects in, so we're in between those two cycles. We're in pretty good shape right now. We just want to make sure we don't miss anything.
Think of questions later on, but please just let me know.
For the sake of peace of mind for the LPAs, does it make any sense to sit down with, or at least on the phone with each LPA and go over projects and say, you know, this one, or you're clear, or?
Well, that's what we're going to do. We're going to query all the projects, check and see where we are with those circumstances, and anything that looks like it might have to change, we'll talk.
Okay, so you're going to
Everyone.
initiate that to.
We'll
to the
definitely reach out to you guys, but if there's any LPA that has any concerns,
Okay.
we're always open to having those conversations at any point in time. So, yeah, don't hesitate if you're feeling uncomfortable, but yeah, we're definitely gonna do that analysis and reach out to each project sponsor on any of those current projects that may need to be adjusted.
When you're talking about amendment, you're talking about things that aren't already planned. So this would be like essentially new projects in those fiscal years, correct?
Almost entirely. There's also a little nuance with, so, didn't want to get to it, but it's fine. Something that I'm sure folks would be interested to know. So there's two types of projects, exempt and non-exempt.
Right.
Non-exempt projects mean you're doing some kind of capacity, adding capacity to an existing facility, with some exceptions. If there's a non-exempt project, meaning it's adding capacity and it may affect air quality, and that project is shifting years in terms of when it's going to open to the public,
Okay.
there's some timeframes there that could come into play that would require an amendment. So that's the rare case that I think that's the exception to what you're saying. So.
Otherwise, then it's new projects that aren't already then, it's new stuff then, it's not already, wait, so it would be like, if you ask for new projects type of thing, it's that type of stuff.
That you would need to have obligated prior to March 2020.
Right, okay.
If it can wait till after that, hold on to it, put it through the MTP update that we've been working on already.
But it's not necessarily new projects, it's also a phase of a project. So the phase of that project needs to be in the,
Okay, then that's
Yep,
also
as
good
well.
to know. So it's gotta be phase of a project that would need to be obligated prior to March.
when Federal Highways goes to get to obligate a project, they'll look at the tip, and if that phase is in the tip, they'll obligate it. If it's not in there, it won't happen.
We've pretty much completed project development. We have all the projects that you're going to submit, but we're going through those. And if we send you an email with questions, please please respond as quickly as possible, because we need that information so that we can complete this process hopefully ahead of schedule. So if you get an email from me, Elizabeth, or Sarah, or Larry, or anybody, please help us with that and get it through as quick as we can. That's it. If you have questions later, we'll be around.
Any other questions or comments for Nick or David? Thanks, guys. The next agenda item is fiscal year 2020 Unified Planning Work Program, and action will be requested today.
Yes, sir. The link to that document, the draft document, was sent out to you with the packet. The draft document has been reviewed by Federal Highways and FTA. They sent in both states, Kentucky and Indiana. They have sent all of their comments to me. They are incorporated in this draft that you can go to on this link here. We need to have that approved by the TPC at their meeting. That is the deadline, because the contracts are being written and signed for our planning funds for next year. This document is a requirement by both states to get those planning funds. So we need to have action recommending approval of the document by the TPC. If you've had a chance or an interest in looking at it.
I make motion to advance the Unified Planning Program for approval to TPC.
I second.
Motion and a second. Any questions? either on the motion or what we're doing? There being none, all those in favor say aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Ayes have it. Other business, is there anything else that needs to come before the TTCC, Nick?
I've just got a note for everybody. I think it was the 2nd of April, KYTC announced the award of, I think, 4 new CMAQ-funded projects in our region. One being in Oldham County, I think it's the Interstate 71 North to KY 53, an additional access ramp lane.
Mm-hmm.
And then in Jefferson County, TARC received about $1.5 million for electric buses, $1.1 million for an outer loop circulator, and Louisville Metro for signal system upgrade and research, kind of an ITS, Intelligent Transportation Systems project. So those are projects that we'll make sure get in to the TIF through an amendment summer. Thanks.
Great. Any other business?
Louisville Metro is going to be updating the Complete Streets Ordinance policies later this year. And in my research of that, I found one of the example cities to look at was Indianapolis. While I was looking at it, the Indianapolis MPO has a Complete Streets policy that applies to STBG funded projects. And I would like to, I'd like for this body to consider a Complete Streets policy for use of STBG funds.
So what are you looking for us to do? I'm sorry?
Well, I don't know, it sounds like Gift is going to be busy for a little while, but I would assume that we would potentially form a working group and start developing a policy and get agreement to that, and then move forward with it with this body's approval. David, do you got any other suggestions on how we might proceed with that?
It would be the chair's discretion.
As always, we set up work groups, and I don't have a problem with that. I guess I wasn't really getting what you were interested in. So are you suggesting we form a committee, a working group today?
Yeah, no time like the present. I still have a job this week.
There you go. So are there any volunteers to, what would we call this? The Complete Streets Work Group?
Complete Streets Policy Work Group. Yeah.
Complete Streets Policy Work Group. This would be a subcommittee of the TTCC?
No, it would be a working group.
Working group, I'm sorry, working group of the TTCC, wrong word. Any volunteers? Staff or?
APCD will volunteer.
I mean, certainly staff would be involved.
Okay. Tom? Okay, so there's 3. Do you think 4 or 5? 3? How many would take?
Well, anybody from Indiana?
Ask New Albany. They're all in Complete Streets.
Really?
You really should though. New Albany's all into it.
And,
That would be our.
Well,
partner in
that's
conflict.
true. They are big into that, right?
and
But I mean, it is going to impact.
You really should ask Rosenberger in New Albany.
Okay.
And I can do that for you because I've been intending to reach out to New Albany and also Jeffersonville that participate in the TTCC a little more frequently than they are, but so I don't mind doing that.
Okay.
Well, Jeffersonville might have an interest. They certainly have an interest in multimodal.
Matt, I think you're interested, aren't you?
Mm-hmm. You're interested in the committee, Matt? Sure. Okay. Well, good. It's growing. That's a good thing. For a quick ad hoc committee, that's all right. Sounds like you've got potentially 5 or 6 members. That sounds like a good working group. Good?
Yeah, I like it.
And I will reach out to New Albany and Jeffersonville. Making myself a note. Okay, any other business before the TTCC. And if they're not, a motion to adjourn, please.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion and a second. All those in favor? Unanimous aye.
Aye.
See you next month.